Hi all, and welcome to Data Lens, the short series where we talk about market research in the outdoor hospitality industry. Today, I'm here with Scott Barr, the president of Cairn Consulting Group. With over 35 years of market research experience, Scott has a wealth of knowledge to share, and I'm here to ask him the questions that you want to know. So let's hop in. On today's episode, we'll be talking about, is market research worth it, and how to validate your business idea before you invest. So Scott, any initial kind of thoughts, comments before we hop in?
Well, since it's what we do as a profession, I'm going to make this to be a 30-second video. It's worth it.
Well, that's one way to hop in.
Thanks everyone for joining us today. And
and that is our clip. Have a good day. So what is market research really, and should you invest? Let's dive in.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked in these videos quite a bit about how to use market research, how to kind of start your own market research, the types of market research, all those things. And this is one of the questions and one of the objections that we get from people all the time who haven't really used market research is the whole idea of budget. How much do you spend? And the idea of what's the value? What's the value proposition of market research? And essentially the idea behind it is you want to minimize your risk. And that's kind of the catchphrase everybody in the industry uses. It's like minimize your risk. Yeah, that can be reflected in a few different ways. One of which is just simply knowing whether or not, like say you have an idea, do people actually like your idea? Will they use your idea? Will they buy your idea? There's that. A key question to have answered. Many people have products and services, and they're like, people are gonna. They want this. People want this, and it's like, how do you know that? How do you really know that? And the other part is how many. How many people actually like? Maybe your family likes it, but maybe your in-laws don't. So what you have is this idea that what market research is going to bring to the table is answers. And some of those answers you might know already. So you're going to, there's some validation going on there that, all right, we validated that this was a good idea because we went out, we did some measurement. But there's, in all the research projects that I've done, there are very few that I can say didn't have at least one surprise in it. At least one thing that we really were way off base on prior, because we all do that. We all try to guess what's going to happen, what's going to be the outcome of this. And there's always a surprise. There's always something that comes up. And in many cases, it's that nugget that you can take with you to the whether it's investors or your product development team or whomever. One organization that we worked with, this was several years ago, but we just did basic customer experience work with them, and they were in the process of developing an app, and they weren't in a rush because they didn't think that their customer base would use it, but they felt like, well, we should probably have one anyway. And in our research, we didn't ask about an app. It came up organically when we essentially at the end of the survey asked people any other comments, like if you could talk to the president of the company, what would you say? And it popped. A lot of people said that they wanted an app. So we took that to the company and said, hey, all these other results aside, there's a decent number of people that are interested in the app. So then we followed that up with just a really quick bullet poll to see interest in the app. And it was there. It was there staring us right in the face. And so they fast-tracked it. They fast-tracked their app development and got themselves ahead of some of the competition as well, and had that as a convenience item for customers. That's the kind of thing that can happen. The other two is with an idea. Sometimes the best answer you can get is no. I think we've talked about that a little bit before, but sometimes that's the answer. It's not the answer we necessarily want or like, but sometimes the answer is no, that it's not worth it, that the appeal is too weak, that the appeal isn't broad-based enough. So it's like, what's that strength of response in people? Do they really like your idea, or are they kind of like, yeah, it's a good idea? That's two very different answers, even though they both can be interpreted as positive. So what you have in terms of this whole idea of, is it worth it, is you have to kind of look at your budget first. Allocate as much as you really can afford from your budget to do your research, because it is worth it. I will readily admit there are projects that aren't worth it. I would be the first to tell you it's not worth it. And I've done that before. I've actually told people that there's no sense in doing this project, because sometimes the cost of doing the project the way it needs to be done or should be done just goes well beyond the budget. And if that's the case, you look for an alternative. But there are projects that are too expensive and they are not worth it. But the research itself is worth it at some level, to have some level of information, to have some level of insight. So, and again, that's a judgment call. And what you have to do is find a research partner who you trust. That's going to not lead you astray. That's not going to just get in there and charge you a huge amount of money. And again, if I repeat myself, that's okay, because I do it all the time. But I've had people go out and spend huge amounts of money with a large research firm, and they get the results back and it just didn't work for them. They didn't get what they wanted out of it. And so then they'll hire me to either analyze the data that they collected or to just do the project again. And that's happened to me several times throughout the years. So it is a matter of trust. And again, you do have to, think about what it is you're getting, and again, ask the questions, because doing the research is worth it. You're going to feel better. You have a lot more confidence. And if you're answering to someone else at a company, the fact that you can bring in some research and some information to the team, it's huge, because they'll appreciate it, but two, you're going to feel better about it as well when you come in there and say, here are the answers to all the questions we had about whether it's this idea to this program to whatever it is you're doing. And afterwards, you're going to say to yourself, yep, it was worth it. It was definitely worth it. And I would say in my career, I've only had a couple of instances of people who didn't think the research was worth it. It does happen once in a while. Sometimes the changeover in staff can happen, and the research was on a track that didn't fit with where the new people wanted to take the company. And so for them, it's like it didn't fit. And that's actually happened a couple times. And another instance, someone was like, it just didn't measure what they thought it would measure. When it all came down to it, they didn't feel like it measured what they really wanted to. Didn't mean it wasn't worth it, really, because there was a lot of really good supporting information in this study. But for them, if you asked them in a quiet moment, they'd probably say it wasn't worth what they paid for that research for that reason. But that's the exception, not the rule. But it can happen. Again, it's a matter of trust. It's working closely with your partners, and you'll get what you want. And at the end of the day, everybody's going to feel a lot better about where you're at.
It's a great insight, especially for a lot of people looking to where do we start? Where do we, begin that investment? The big question that came from that initial point there was, what are some key indicators that when you need market research?
Some of the key indicators are when people are making decisions that aren't based on metrics, and that's one big key indicator that people are talking about something within the organization, something that's happening, and when they start saying, well, I heard from so-and-so and the sales team, and they said that customer told them that they didn't like this, or that they did like it. When you start hearing that without an anecdote that's out there, free-form anecdotes, that's an indicator. If an anecdote is used to support a metric, then that's fine. So that's one of the keys. It's like, what's that connection? Is there a connection with that anecdote to something? If someone's in your metrics say that this division of sales was up, the last quarter, and the sales team says, yeah, the sales are up because we heard from some customers that this change we made to what we're doing has really had an impact on them, and they like the product a lot better. So there you go. You just use an anecdote, but there's a metric behind it. Now it's like, okay, that's okay. You're probably okay. But if someone just uses that without the metric supporting it, it's like sales are flat, and someone says, well, the customers are saying they really like this new product. It's kind of like there's a drop off here. The connection isn't happening. And so now you're going to need to go out there and explore. If sales are flat, but some people have heard that they feel like there's improvement, why aren't we seeing that in the bottom line numbers? So there's an indicator that you should do some research. Another is that someone, it could be in a meeting, it could be an email, it could be anywhere, it could be at lunch, where someone has a question and they don't know where to get the answer. That they've gone out there, maybe they've used some AI, maybe they've used some other sources, but they still don't have an answer, and they don't have the answer that they want to get, that they need, I should say, is more the case. That there's the answer is incomplete. There's an answer, but there's no explanation as to why. And that kind of goes to the first example I was using a little bit. It's like looking at the why. Why are things changing? Why are things not changing? Or whatever the case may be. In those instances, if you can't tie that outcome, your KPIs maybe, to specific initiatives, to specific changes, to specific market conditions, you need research. You need to figure out what's going on there. Because again, even if it's a positive, you want to know what that positive is, because so you could really push that forward, so you can leverage that positive as much as possible. So the bottom line is that whenever there's a question, and if the answer is weak or it doesn't have any backing, there really isn't an adequate answer, then you need some research. And sometimes, again, that answer could be just half there. For example, someone says, well, we know that sales with people in the 25 to 34 year age band are really liking the product or something like that. It could be something along those lines. Well, what about the 35 to 44 year olds? What do we know about them? And if you can't say, here's what's going on with them, okay, now you need some research. You need to do some group comparisons. It could be a gender-based. It's like, or someone will just say, I'd like to know how women feel about our product or service. I'd like to know how people in the 35 to 44-year-old age band feel about our product. Because we know, overall, you may have the global picture and you may have your KPIs in place. But if you need those answers at that level, again, that speaks to you need some research. And those are all indicators. And in most organizations, there's probably one thing that you could ask anyone there, and that, what is your biggest pain point? What is the thing that keeps you awake at night? What's that one thing that we need to address, that we need to fix? And if there's nothing, well, you don't need any research. But if there is something, you need to do some research.
Definitely. No, and that last question too, it's like I've definitely heard this in sales calls many times. What keeps you up at night? It's kind of like the sales 101, but now it's like you take that sales question and now you basically answer it with data and research. So yeah, I think a lot of companies would find a lot of use in being able to answer that question with some data. So.
Yes. Yeah, so. If you could, once you can answer those questions with data, again, as I said earlier, everyone will feel better.
Definitely. Wrapping up today's questions. So do you think that there is enough data out there to solve these complex business challenges?
The short answer is no. There, as one might expect, I'd say that. There's a lot of data out there, though. What I would do to qualify my answer is that the data that exists in many cases isn't being utilized adequately. It's not, I always call it squeezing information out of it. Squeeze as much information as you can out of all the data points, looking at all the interactions, looking at all the possible scenarios, combining data sets. There's a lot of data that could help people a great deal right now if they really went out, started to do that type of deep analysis on it. I know some, resources can impact that, but that's part of what we do. We do that analysis. We do that digging in. I think that if you take any piece of information that you have and think about how many different ways you can look at it, do it. Just do it. You'll always be surprised at what comes out of it. I did some analysis for a client, and we had 6 data fields, and I did like a 10-page report based on those 6 fields, and it gave them a great deal of information just on a limited amount of data. And that's just one example of how you can take information and work it. You just got to work it a little bit. And the other part, I said when I said no, we always need to be enhancing our data sets, but it needs to be well planned out. We need to make sure that we've again looked at the existing data as much as possible and got what we can out of that before we move on to something new. But the new information needs to complement what we already have. So that's why it's incumbent upon us to actually look at all the existing data first and then move on and gather new information to complement it and not just repeat things. But there's always a need for it, because once you stop asking questions, that's when your business grows stagnant and the ideas stop flowing. So there's always a need to have a refresh, again, to do some idea testing, to get some ideation, go out there and start generating some interactions with customers and non-customers, get some ideas going, get that flow going, because that's what it's all about too. Once you get to that point, you're in a pretty comfortable situation in terms of your information systems, because you've already done all that prior work.
Well, that was all I had for today. So thank you everyone for joining us today for another episode of Data Lens from Cairn Consulting Group. Today we covered, is market research worth it, and how to validate your business idea before you invest. So don't forget to leave a comment or a question for next week's episode. Hit that like button if you like what you see. And as always, subscribe so you never miss out. Have a good day.
Bye.